Imagine a landscape of golden dust and ancient stones, where the wind seems to whisper the names of ancestors long forgotten by the rest of the world. This is the starting point of a journey that spans over 3,000 years, a story of a nation that exists in two dimensions at once, the spiritual and the physical. To understand why the Israel you see on the news today feels so vastly different from the one described in the ancient texts, we must first look at the ancient archetype. This was the original character of biblical Israel, a land defined not by technology or military power, but by shepherds, prophets, and divine covenants. In this era, the sky seemed to hang lower, closer to the earth, and the people lived in a constant dialogue with the divine. The patriarchs walked these hills, building altars of unhewn stone, and listening for a voice that spoke in the thunder and the stillness. The character of this land was a kingdom of priests, a light to the nations, and a sacred vessel for the laws of morality and justice. It was a place where the mundane acts of farming and family were woven into a grand tapestry of spiritual purpose. But history is often written in tears and fire, and this leads us to the chapter of the first betrayal. This was not a betrayal by a single person, but a profound and traumatic shattering of the connection between the people and their spiritual identity. When the Babylonian armies marched the inhabitants away from their hills, it was a dramatic separation. Imagine the psychological toll of being removed from the soil that was supposed to be your eternal inheritance. By the rivers of Babylon, the people wept, hanging their harps on willow trees because the songs of Zion felt too heavy to sing in a foreign land. This exile was the first time the people had to learn how to exist without a temple, without a king, and without a home. The physical soil was lost, and for the first time, the Holy Land began its transformation from a physical reality into a ghost that would haunt the collective consciousness for nearly 2,000 years. For centuries, this ghost of the past was all that remained to sustain a people scattered to the four corners of the earth. Through the long, dark nights of the diaspora, from the cold streets of Europe to the hidden corners of North Africa, the memory of the Holy Land was kept alive with a fierce, burning intensity. But over time, the memory changed. It became an idealized vision, a Bible garden where the lion would lay down with the lamb, and the prophets would once again speak with the voice of God. This was a celestial Jerusalem, a place of pure spirit and prophetic fulfillment that was almost entirely detached from the gritty realities of maps, taxes, and borders. For the weary immigrant and the scholar in the library, the Holy Land was a promise, a spiritual anchor that kept their identity from drifting away in the storms of history. It was a dream of return that felt more like a prayer than a political goal. Everything changed in the year 1948. This was the moment of the modern incarnation, a jarring and violent resurrection that shocked the world. After 2,000 years of existing as a ghost, the spirit of the nation was suddenly forced back into a physical body. However, the body it inhabited was not the one the ancient archetypes would have recognized. The transition was not just a political event. It was a collision between two different worlds. The secular pioneers who founded the modern state were not looking to build a kingdom of priests. They were survivors of a 20th century nightmare, looking for a safe harbor and a modern nation that could defend itself with steel and innovation. They built cities of concrete and glass, drained swamps, and paved highways over the ruins of the past. This was a version of Israel that was born out of necessity and secular vision, a geopolitical fortress that stood in stark contrast to the quiet pastoral images of the ancient scriptures. This brings us to the central conflict that defines the soul of the nation today. There is a deep, agonizing tension between the theological expectations of a holy people and the cold, hard reality of a 21st century state. The world often looks at modern Israel and expects to see the prophets walking the streets of Tel Aviv, but instead, they find a high-tech powerhouse and a secular society. This friction exists within the people themselves, creating a family feud that never truly ends. The religious factions struggle against the secular pioneers, each fighting for the nation's spiritual soul. One side looks back at the ancient covenants, demanding that the laws of the desert be the laws of the modern city. The other side looks forward, wanting to be a nation like any other, defined by democracy and progress, rather than divine decree. It is the struggle of a modern child trying to live up to the impossible legend of an ancestor they have never truly known. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. As we navigate these layers of history and identity, we must confront the uncomfortable truth that the Israel of today is a geopolitical entity, not a time capsule from the Iron Age. But just as we think we understand the divide, a shadow begins to fall over the traditional narrative. Deep beneath the shifting sands of the Judean wilderness, a discovery has recently come to light that threatens to shake the very foundations of everything we thought we knew. An archaeological find, kept away from the public eye for years, has surfaced. It is a collection of artifacts and inscriptions that do not fit the established map of the Holy Land. These findings challenge the traditional geographical boundaries of the Bible, suggesting that the sacred locations of the prophets might not be exactly where the modern world believes them to be. This revelation raises a haunting question. If the physical location of the promise is different, what does that mean for the state that was built upon it? The truth that has been hidden is starting to leak through the cracks of history, and what it reveals will change the way you look at the map forever. The friction of this modern incarnation is perhaps most visible in the daily life of what we call the New Israeli. This figure is a walking contradiction, a person who might work in a gleaming skyscraper in Tel Aviv, designing artificial intelligence or cybersecurity software, while living in a land where every shovel of dirt turned over for a new foundation might uncover a 3,000-year-old oil lamp. This is the struggle between the New Israeli and the Old Hebrew. The Old Hebrew was a man of the soil and the spirit, defined by his relationship with the divine and his adherence to ancient laws that governed everything from what he ate to how he farmed. The New Israeli, however, is a product of 20th century survival and 21st century technology. This individual is fiercely independent, often secular, and driven by a need to be a part of the global community rather than a separate kingdom of priests. This identity struggle creates a persistent friction that vibrates through the entire society. It is the sound of a high-speed train cutting through the same valleys where David once fled from the armies of Saul. For many, the weight of the ancient archetype is a burden that feels too heavy for a modern citizen to carry. They want to be a nation like all other nations, with sports teams, pop stars, and a thriving economy that competes on the world stage. Yet, the ghost of the past refuses to stay silent. It whispers from the stones of the Western Wall and echoes in the sirens that bring the entire country to a standstill on Memorial Days. This is not just a disagreement over lifestyle. It is a profound existential crisis. Can a person truly be both a citizen of a modern democracy and a member of a holy covenant that demands total devotion to a different set of laws? This internal tension spills over into what can only be described as a family feud for the nation's soul. On one side, we have the secular pioneers and their descendants who view the state as a triumph of human will and political necessity. To them, the state is a refuge, a place where Jewish people can finally hold the steering wheel of their own destiny without waiting for a messianic intervention. On the other side, the religious factions see the state as either a vessel for divine law or, in some extreme cases, a secular distraction from the true spiritual mission. In the neighborhoods of Jerusalem, these two worlds often live side by side, yet they exist in different centuries. You will see a young woman in military fatigues, carrying an assault rifle, walking past an elderly man in a black silk coat, who is reciting prayers written thousands of years ago. They share the same sidewalk, they use the same currency, and they breathe the same air. But they are walking through two fundamentally different versions of reality. This struggle for the nation's soul is further complicated by a cultural metamorphosis that is unique in human history. The Hebrew language, which had been reserved for prayer and study for nearly 2,000 years, was forced back to life in a way that was almost unnatural. Imagine taking the formal, ritualistic language of an ancient temple and trying to use it to describe an internal combustion engine or a sophisticated computer hack. This revival, led by visionaries who believed a modern nation needed a living tongue, created a fascinating but jarring disconnect. Today, the sacred text, which was once handled with trembling hands and whispered in holy chambers, has been transformed into everyday slang. The words used by the prophets to describe the glory of God are now used by teenagers on the street to describe a good party or a frustrating traffic jam. This desacralization of the language is a mirror of the nation's own journey. By bringing the ancient into the modern, something was gained, but something deeply mystical was undoubtedly lost. The language of the heavens has become the language of the marketplace, and in that transition, the bridge between the Old Hebrew and the New Israeli became both stronger and more fragile. As the nation solidified its physical presence, it had to face the price of sovereignty. This is often called the revenge of history. For 2,000 years, the people were the victims of history, a group without a land or an army, defined by their endurance and their commitment to justice in the face of persecution. But when the state was resurrected in 1948, it had to become an actor in history. This meant making choices that the ancient prophets might have found difficult to reconcile with their vision of a holy kingdom. To survive in a hostile geopolitical neighborhood, the modern incarnation had to build a military machine that is now among the most advanced in the world. The moral landscape began to shift. The biblical ideals of justice and mercy, which are easy to preach when one is powerless, become incredibly complex when one holds the sword and the shield. The geopolitical fortress must prioritize security and survival, sometimes at the expense of the idealized moral purity expected by those who only know the Israel of the Bible. This creates a haunting dissonance for those who look at the modern state and see a military power instead of a peaceful kingdom of priests. The emotional toll of this reality is felt most deeply by the immigrants who arrive every year from all corners of the globe. Many come with a heart full of stories from the Bible garden, fueled by the songs and prayers of their ancestors. They expect to find a place where the air tastes of honey and every stranger is a brother in spirit. They arrive at the airport expecting a homecoming to a spiritual paradise, but they step out into a concrete reality of bureaucracy, high prices, and intense political division. They find a geopolitical fortress that is often harsh, loud, and demanding. The dream of the ancient archetype is suddenly replaced by the reality of finding a job, learning a difficult language, and living under the constant shadow of regional conflict. For some, the shock is too much. They feel like they have arrived at the right address, but at the wrong time. They are looking for the prophets, but they find politicians. They are looking for the sacred, but they find the mundane. This gap between the dream and the reality is not a secret, but it is a truth that is often whispered rather than shouted in the public square. As we look deeper into the foundations of the modern state, we begin to find clues that this disconnect was not an accident of history. Recent research into the private papers and diaries of the early secular pioneers reveals a shocking truth that many are not prepared to face. There exists a collection of documents that outline a hidden debate between prophecy and policy. These papers suggest that the founders of the modern state had a vision that was far more radical than the public was led to believe during the early years of the nation. They were not just building a home, They were intentionally creating something that was meant to replace the ancient religious identity with a new, secular nationalism. They knew that the Old Hebrew could not survive the challenges of the 20th century, so they set out to build a new Israeli, even if it meant breaking the heart of the ancient archetypes. These documents, long hidden in the archives, suggest that the Israel we see today is exactly what the founders intended. A modern machine that uses the symbols of the past to power a future that has very little room for the prophets. The tension we feel today is the result of a deliberate design, a choice made in the shadows of 1948 that is only now beginning to be fully understood as the mask of the past is slowly pulled away. The breaking point arrives not in a moment of peace, but in the heat of modern fire. We see the ultimate collision when the ancient wars of Yahweh meet the high-tech reality of today. In the biblical narrative, battles were won through faith, where faith was more important than the strength of the arm. But the modern incarnation lives in a world where survival is dictated by algorithms, satellite imagery, and long-range precision strikes. The ancient archetype, that ghost of the past, watches as the geopolitical fortress deploys its invisible shields. This contrast creates a jarring dissonance for those who still expect a miraculous intervention. If the victories of today are won through human ingenuity, does that mean the old covenants have been silenced? This is the breaking point where the theological dream of a kingdom of priests shatters against the hard concrete of a modern military power. The friction is no longer a debate. It is a visceral struggle felt in every siren that wails across the landscape. Yet, within this hardness, there is a persistent quest for redemption. Is it possible to bridge the gap between the secular soil and the sacred promise? Many seek a middle ground where 21st century technology can coexist with the ancient moral compass. The religious factions push for a state reflecting the laws of Sinai, while the secular pioneers argue that the greatest redemption is the existence of a sovereign refuge. They look at the desert they have turned green as a different kind of miracle of human will. They believe that the sacred is not something that descends from the clouds, but something built through sweat and innovation. This is the redemption of the reality, a messy attempt to be both a normal nation and a holy people. It is a bridge still being built, one stone at a time. As we peel back the layers, the mask is removed, and we face the truth. Modern Israel is a geopolitical entity, not a time capsule from the days of the prophets. To see it as a museum is to ignore the living people who inhabit it today. The truth they hid is that the state was never meant to be a perfect recreation of the ancient archetype. It was designed to be a functional, sovereign power capable of protecting its citizens. The founders knew that a modern nation could not be governed by literal interpretations of ancient texts without chaos. They chose policy over prophecy, creating a state that uses the language of the past to legitimize a future entirely its own. The disconnect between the Bible and the modern state is not a failure, but a fundamental characteristic of its birth. This brings us to a spiritual resolution. If the modern state is not the biblical Israel in a literal sense, then where does the true Israel reside? The answer lies in the values of the heart rather than the borders on a map. The spiritual resolution lies in understanding that the essence of the ancient archetype was never about a piece of land, but about a commitment to justice and mercy. When we stop looking for the prophets in Parliament and start looking for them in acts of compassion, the gap begins to close. The true Israel lies in the hope of those who believe that even in a geopolitical fortress, the soul can remain free. This shift moves the focus from military might to moral weight, allowing for a more mature understanding of what it means to be a light unto the nations. This leads to the final overcoming of the identity crisis. By accepting that the modern incarnation is a separate reality, we can stop measuring it against an impossible standard of biblical perfection. we can appreciate the secular state for its achievements, while still holding on to the sacred mysteries of the ancient texts. This mature perspective allows us to see the nation not as a disappointment to the past, but as a living evolution. It is a recognition that history moves in spirals, constantly revisiting old themes while moving towards something new. The immigrants who once felt lost begin to find their place, not as characters in a Bible story, but as authors of a new chapter. They realize the Bible garden and the geopolitical fortress are both part of the same landscape, and that the tension between them is what gives the nation its unique energy. In the end, we find a resolution that honors history and the present. The hidden truth is not a threat, but a call to a deeper love. It is a call to love the reality of a people as they are, while respecting the power of ancient promises. We no longer have to choose between the secular and the sacred, because they are two sides of the same coin. The modern state is the body, and the ancient archetype is the memory. As we look at the Israel of today, we see a nation wrestling with its shadows and seeking its voice. The Israel of today is not the Israel of the Bible, but it is the living legacy of that spirit, fighting to find its way. By embracing this truth, we find a path that celebrates the mystery of the past without being blinded by it. We leave this journey with a heart that understands that the greatest holy land is not a place on a map, but the ground we stand on when we choose to live with integrity and hope. This is the truth that allows the ancient and the modern to finally speak the same language, not of stones and borders, but of the human spirit. It is the realization that while the world around us changes, the search for a meaningful existence remains as constant as the desert wind. We carry this understanding forward, respecting the old and the new as one continuous, unfolding story.